I'm Frank Garza, and welcome to Here and Abroad, a podcast that follows the U.S. men's national team and their player pool across Europe, MLS, or wherever else they play their club football. We've had 2 full weekends now to watch the USMNT player pool back at their clubs since the Concacaf Nations League failure. On today's show, we're going to discuss which of them have impressed us the most and least since their return. To help me do that, I've invited Larry Henry Jr. back to the show. Larry is the managing editor for SBI Soccer and live reporter at The Athletic. So, Larry, I really wanted this show to be kind of a check-in on how this U.S. player pool has been performing since returning to their clubs after the Nations League fiasco. Let's start with the European-based players. You've had 2 weekends now to watch their performances. Who's one player that's impressed you so far?
Yeah, first off, Frank, thanks for having me again. Always appreciate it. Love to give you a shout out on that end. But looking at the players, right? Obviously, we know the March international window was very disappointing for the national team. I'm sure Mauricio Pochettino is pretty pissed off, and don't mind if I say that because I know he probably was. But yeah, I think looking at the players, right? I wanted to look at somebody who maybe has had a really good season that wasn't involved in that camp. And I think that's Paxton Aronson. I think he's had a really good season on loan in the Dutch league. 7 goals, 5 assists for FT Utrecht. I know he wasn't in the camp. There's a lot of midfield options right now for Pochettino to consider. So I think that kind of hurts Paxton Aronson in that aspect because he is a young player. He's 21. But I think he's a guy that he has racked up a lot of minutes this season, over 2,600 minutes at club level. Is very creative, very dynamic, has played as a midfielder, has played as a second number 9 most recently for the club. I think he brings a lot of energy, kind of like his brother does, Brendan. They're both really good at pressing defenders and forcing mistakes. They just have that engine that kind of never gives up. So I think that's one guy that's really impressed me this season. Again, I know he wasn't in the camp, but I think he's definitely a guy for this summer that we should see in the mix, especially if coming after this window, right, where a lot of the midfielders weren't all that creative. Christian Pulisic didn't have a great window. I didn't think Weston McKennie had a particularly good window. So I think that just opens the door for Pochettino to consider some other players. So I think Aronson's definitely one. And I think, as the kind of last month of the season goes in Europe, we're going to probably, talk about some other guys that should be in the mix for the Gold Cup.
How far away do you think Paxton Aronson is from actually making it into a 23-man roster? Because I seem to recall he's been into some January camps, I'm sure, in his career. I think he's even made it into like what we would consider like A-team camp, maybe even under Berhalter to maybe just to have a look, but he hasn't been there very often, and I don't think he's made it into one camp under Pochettino. The midfield seems to be pretty crowded. I mean, how far outside the bubble do you think he is?
I don't think he's too far. I think the U.S. right now is at a point where, Pochettino has said it in the past. He wants to take a look at a wide range of players. He's got, a year still until the World Cup, so he probably wants to get a good hard look at everybody. Yes, that means there's probably going to be some players who maybe are deserving or maybe even not deserving that maybe don't get a full look just because of that. I think Aronson is right on the cusp of being there. The problem is I think we have so many good midfielders, but maybe not that many consistent creative midfielders. I mean, we think about it, right? You have Pulisic, who's probably their best, creative option. And then, you look at the other midfielders that are usually in the mix, McKennie, Musa, Adams. I mean, those guys aren't the most creative players. They're hardworking players, and you need players like that in the squad. But at some point, you're going to have to start, giving some of these creative players a chance, especially after the March window where, you only scored 1 goal. in 2 games, you lost both of them. And your key attacking weapon, Christian Pulisic, was held in check for pretty much both of those games. So I think Aronson definitely has a chance. I think he's in the mix. I've expect to see him, if he stays healthy over this next month, continues to be productive at Utrecht, to possibly get a chance in that roster for the Gold Cup. And I think, if the U.S. continue to have maybe, some disappointing performances, especially at the midfield position, I think that just opens the door for guys like Paxton Aronson and some others to really kind of boost their stock ahead of the World Cup.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, he's at FC Utrecht on loan, I believe, for the season. Could go back to Eintracht Frankfurt next season. I mean, who knows? But I mean, if he can go back there and in the the next European season start getting some regular minutes with that club, I mean, that's a pretty decent sized club, right? That if he's getting regular minutes and doing well, that could give him another push to maybe make it into a World Cup roster. I'll tell you who, when I just think about these last couple weeks since the international break, when I was trying to think of who has impressed me, I got to be honest, there weren't that many that popped into my European-based players in the last 2 weeks. I thought of Josh Sargent, who I believe he scored a goal in each of the last 2 weeks. So even though he had that disappointment in the Nations League, he hasn't let that deter him at his club. He's come back, and that's all he can do is just keep scoring goals. So I think he's had a goal in each of his 2 matches since the international break. I thought Weston McKennie, he started both matches for Juventus. They have the new coach now, so that was good to see that the new coach believes in him as well. Nothing really changed there as well as far as his minutes. And then I think Malik Tillman is worth mentioning as well. He got a goal this past weekend, and him coming off of his injury, I think he went the full 90 minutes as well. So good to see him, making progress. What about a player who has not impressed you these last couple weeks, or somebody whose performance you were a little disappointed in?
Yeah, I think one guy that stands out a little bit, and maybe looking at just the last performance he had, but Yunus Musa, I think he's maybe taken a little bit of a step back with AC Milan over the last couple weeks. I think he's had a productive season in terms of just playing and racking up the minutes. He's played 2,000 minutes, but a lot of those he's been in and out of the squad, right? I think even under Pioli, under Fonseca in the past, it seems like he's been in and out of the squad. He hasn't really had a consistent, starting role like Christian Pulisic has. I know they're 2 different players, but I think it was just this weekend, right? AC Milan goes down 2-0 at home. Musa was at fault for both of those goals. Gets yanked off in the 23rd minute. Probably disappointed in his performance. The coach obviously upset with the performance. It just seems like we had a lot of high expectations for Yunus Musa. This season hasn't maybe gone as well as he would have hoped at club level. Luckily for him, he has about a month to kind of get back on track and hopefully play as many minutes as he can and get some form going for the summer. But overall, I think it's been a kind of a step back for him this season and definitely the last couple weeks.
Yeah, it's just been a weird year, I think, for Yunus Musa, because it does seem like we're continuously disappointed with him both at the club level and the national team level, And with Milan, I mean, I can't think of the last time I saw a guy get pulled in the 20-something minute, like when it wasn't injury related, So the coach had to be pretty unhappy, and they said something on the I was watching that game, and they said something on the broadcast at halftime that he had left the field after that, and then he came out and gave Concacaf a hug. Almost like he had gotten pit. I'm reading into it. This is just was mentioned on the broadcast, but almost like he got pissed off, and kind of left, but then settled down and came back. I don't know if there's any truth to that, but maybe he was just frustrated. But yeah, I mean, he seems to be starting almost every match. So I mean, they keep giving him the starts at Milan, right? I mean, but he keeps having these kind of subpar performances, and there just seems to be this like they don't know where to put him with the national team. It's almost like you don't trust him in the midfield because he loses the ball so often, but then he just doesn't seem to fit on the right wing, where he's been playing either. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what's going to come out of Yunus Musa, but it's just like I don't really see. It's just hard to see exactly where he fits in the national team, right now.
Yeah, it's tough. Just I think for Musa, right, like you said, I think right at this point the AC Milan has had a pretty underwhelming season in terms of where they want to be in the league, where they wanted to be in the Champions League. I know they won the Super Cup in the winter, but overall, I mean they've changed coaches. Things haven't really gone as planned, and so I think at that point, the coach might be trying to, who knows if his job is going to be safe come the end of the season. So he might be trying to, you take Moose off after 23 minutes. It's frustrating. It's disappointing. But again, he could be doing that, too, for his job to try to save a result. And they were able to get a point out of the match. But again, at home, you'd figure Milan gets 3 points. And yeah, I mean, I'm curious to see where Yunus Musa goes from here because he's a talented player. He's a hardworking player. I think he's definitely skillful. I know the U.S. fan base was definitely excited to get him committed to the national team. But it seems like there was a lot of excitement about him going to AC Milan, and I think this season's been a little bit of a step back, and I'm curious if that kind of affects his future with the club, and does that mean maybe he moves on at the end of the season? I mean, we'll see. I'm sure he wants to probably stay, but it could be out of his hands at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you got to think after the season they've had, they're going to turn over a lot of players, and they might decide he's not in the plans and he's looking for a new club. I mean, that'll be interesting to see. A couple other players I just want to mention that I thought have had a disappointing couple of weeks. I mean, first of all, Gio Reyna feels like I've been talking about him a lot when it comes to like disappointments, but I mean, he's not even coming off the bench. We've been complaining that he only comes off for these 10, 15 minutes at the end of the games, but the last two matches he's been an unused sub. Hasn't even got a minute, so it just seems like seems to be like this downward spiral with him, at Dortmund, where things are getting worse and worse. I mean, he came in the national team. It didn't seem like Pochettino had much trust or much faith in him, didn't play him that much. And so he's just another player that I think has had a really rough couple weeks as well. I have Christian Pulisic as well. I mean, I know he had an assist, I think, this past weekend, but it still just rubs me the wrong way that the game 2 matches ago where he let Santi Jimenez have the penalty. That really bugged me, that he would hand the ball over, like that when his team's down 2-0 and like they really needed that goal. And so that's why I kind of put him in that category. But overall, he I guess has been pretty solid. Outside of that. Well, let's go to MLS then, and we'll include Liga MX in here as well. So we'll include MLS or Liga MX based players. Who's a player from those leagues that has impressed you over the last couple of weeks?
I think looking at it, there's a couple guys, but overall, I think you have to look at Diego Luna and what he's been able to continue to do in the early stages of the MLS season for Real Salt Lake. 3 goals, 2 assists in 6 matches. He's played a little over 500 minutes so far. I think he's already on pace to set new career high in goals and assists. He had a career best year last year with 8 goals and 12 assists. So I think he's such a dynamic player, a fun player to watch. I thought he was one of the few players that actually impressed during the March international window. That performance that he had. Overall, the skill to set up Patrick Agyemang for the goal against Canada. He's got a bright future for sure, and it's definitely not surprising that there's growing interest in him. Abroad. I think that this could be the year where if he has another season like he did, we could be talking about Diego Luna in the winter going to Europe. So he's been definitely impressive. I think he does a lot of good things. He just seems like a physical attacking menace with or without the ball. So I think that's only going to grow with more and more playing time. So he's definitely been impressive for me. And then another guy who again hasn't really been on the senior national team picture yet. I think he will be in the coming years. But Alex Freeman, who over for Orlando City, he's a right back. He's 20 years old. He plays for the youth national teams. He's had a really good start for Orlando City this season, 2 goals and 1 assist in 7 matches. This looks to be his breakout year in MLS after mainly featuring for Orlando City B and MLS Next Pro. But, could be a guy that we're maybe talking about long term being a depth piece at right back for the national team.
Yeah, we definitely need that. We definitely need more depth at both right and left back. That's for sure. Yeah, good call on Diego Luna. He was the number 1 guy on my list. Scored the brace over the weekend against the Galaxy. I mean, you just look at the momentum he has. Like the January camp. Pochettino's talking about the size of his balls, after the match, after he came on with the broken nose and delivered the assist. Then you fast forward to the next camp, the Nations League. He didn't speak very positively about very many players, but again, called them out in the press conference as a player whose performance he liked after the Canada game. So it's like both of the last 2 camps, Pochettino specifically been calling this guy out after the matches as somebody that's impressed him. You got to think at this point, since he's already impressed the coach, if he keeps just playing well in MLS, scoring goals, having assists, he's put himself in a really good position, right? I mean, if the coach is calling you out after every match, talking about how great you're playing, and you're going back to your club and scoring, I mean, you're in a good position. You're in a good position. So one guy I wanted to ask you about is Jack McGlynn, because he's another guy I had on my list. He scored a goal for Houston over the weekend against LAFC. It was a shot from distance. And I know you, as a Philadelphia Union guy, have watched him plenty. I mean, he's a guy that's really starting to grow on me as somebody that whose potential isn't so far out in the future, but maybe could help this team, in 2026. I mean, where do you stand on him? Do you think he has a serious shot of breaking into the World Cup roster?
I think he does. I think he's probably right now at the same point where I kind of put Paxton Aronson in terms of, right on that kind of, maybe 23 to 28, 29 spot in terms of like the amount of players that they're. McGlynn, I think, does a little bit differently than Aronson, where Aronson, similar again to his brother, they're gonna pester you, they're gonna run around, they're gonna try to kind of cause havoc and force errors, and they're gonna get into those small pockets of space and try to create things. McGlynn is just a straight up passer. He's gonna, I think, pass you to death in terms of his just ability to find open players. He's Jim Curtin in the past has always praised his IQ as a young player, and it shows. He makes a lot of passes that you wouldn't nearly wouldn't see a lot of players make. I think he even scored that really good goal in the January camp. I think it was on his debut. He scored a really good goal. Had a really good goal, like you said, for Houston over the weekend. Honestly, I was shocked he stayed in MLS, because I know there was interest abroad in him, and whether a deal maybe with Philadelphia couldn't have been done, or maybe he wanted to maybe stay another year, or maybe there could have been a bunch of different things. But he's been a really good player this season. I think he's definitely would be on the mix for the Gold Cup and just continue that kind of trajectory upward. He could definitely make this World Cup roster and be an impact off the bench. With the amount of midfielders we have, but good for him. He's definitely, like Diego Luna, has really kind of taken this opportunity and made the most of it.
Yeah. Yeah, he's taken that January camp performance a lot farther than I thought he could, or would. And now I think he's firmly in the mix, and Pochettino obviously trusts him because he put him into I think it was the Panama game in the Nations League, semifinals in an important moment. So we clearly trust him. So I'm looking forward to continuing to watch him this season. Okay, so what about a player, MLS or Liga MX based, who's disappointed you over these last couple weeks?
Yeah, I think, overall, again, there's a couple guys that you could pick out, but one guy I think that definitely hasn't kind of risen to the occasion in the last couple weeks, maybe last couple months, is Cade Cowell with Chivas. He's still looking to get off the the mark with goals in the new season. I know he had a really good fall season with 5 goals. Still waiting to get a goal in the spring season. I know he has 1 assist in Champions Cup play, but again, I think kind of a similar situation. He's been in, maybe with Yunus Musa, he's been in and out of the squad. He hasn't really kind of solidified a consistent starting spot, and that's going to happen when you're unable to score or get assists. Chivas is playing, multiple competitions and busy spring schedule, but Cade Cowell is definitely a guy who I think is underwhelmed the last couple weeks, especially, since the start of the new year. And we've, I know Brandon Vasquez was a guy who, did particularly well in Liga MX and then came back to MLS with Austin. Maybe, this summer, that could maybe be a possibility for Cade Cowell. Could we see him potentially make the move back to MLS in terms to, getting a consistent role and hopefully getting his form back? Because he's just kind of going down the ranks right now on the player pool for the national team. If he continues to not score goals and not get assists at club level.
Yeah, you're right. He has been quiet. It felt like that first season with Chivas, he started to make some noise, and you would see highlights of him either scoring goals or, assists or making good runs. And I just haven't heard much from him about him at all. This Liga MX season. You've been hearing a lot about Zendejas, but I just don't hear much about Cade Cowell. And he seems like the type of player that Pochettino would like to have on the team. His willingness to go forward and take risks and take chances. He seems like he's that player that's going to do that for you. So it would be nice to see. I've always been a big Cade Cowell fan. I think he's a really exciting player to watch. So it'd be nice to see him get going at Chivas. And you mentioned actually the guy that's number 1 on my list in terms of disappointment, and this Brandon Vasquez. So I'm an Austin FC fan. So I watch them, pretty regularly, and I've just been disappointed with the start that he's gotten off to. He hasn't had much of an impact with Austin. I think maybe he scored 1 goal, if I remember correctly. But the match over the weekend against Portland, I just didn't see him have that many opportunities. He just doesn't seem to have that many opportunities. And I think a lot of it because Austin FC has a lot of new pieces. They have a new coach. Maybe they're still figuring out how to get everyone to work together. But with the injuries that the U.S. has had with the striker position, this is the time where he could have made a move, and gotten further into the conversation, but he just hasn't done enough to help himself yet in the MLS season, get back into the conversation. So I'm hoping he can get it going again, but been disappointed with them, so far. I mean, and one other guy I'll just mention real briefly is Patrick Agyemang. He's another guy that, he's had the good USMNT camps, right? He scored goals, But with Charlotte, he just hasn't. I think he scored one this season. Again, he just hasn't like really gotten going. And you just think that if there's a striker from MLS that's going to make it into the World Cup roster, they're going to have to be scoring like a lot of goals at the MLS level, you know. So I'd like to see him get going, you know, as well. I can't say that he's been poor. I haven't seen, you know, the goals, you know, coming from him. Well, all right then, Larry. I mean, that's our, I guess, 2-week update as we continue to kind of grieve the Concacaf Nations League and, you know, try and move forward. I got a couple months, you know, left in the European season, so hopefully we'll see some more good performances. Thanks for joining the show. I'll make sure and put links in the show notes to your X account, which is at lhenry019, and also to your work at SBI Soccer. Thanks so much for coming back on the show, Larry.
Appreciate it, Frank. Thanks for having me, and we'll do it again soon.
Yeah, hopefully. And thanks to everyone for listening to Here and Abroad. If you enjoyed the episode, please do me a huge favor and hit that subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube, or that follow button if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or somewhere else. Thank you so much. I'm Frank Garza. You can follow me on X at FrankGarza007, and I'll be back next week with a new episode.